So joining me now is John Boniface. He is co-founder and president of Free Speech for People. I've talked to John on a number of occasions, and Free Speech for People does a lot of great work, including getting money out of politics, fighting corruption, fighting legal battles. And John has done amazing work in litigation in his life in the past, fighting Chevron, Texaco oil companies for their destruction of the Amazon, and the list goes on and on. But John, I actually think you're on one of your most important missions here. It seems like a tawdry subject, but I think it's one that could really unwind the presidency in a lot of ways. So I want to talk to you about your case on the issue of Michael Cohen and the $1.6 million payment that was made. So welcome to the show. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And tell us about this case and your guys' role in it.
Well, Free Speech for People, where I direct, is engaged in now filing a complaint before the Federal Election Commission and a letter to the Department of Justice urging that it open an investigation into the $1.6 million hush money payment paid to a former or Playboy model by a former RNC official, allegedly. But the question is whether that former RNC official, Elliot Brody, paid this hush money payment to cover up his own affair with this Playboy model, or whether it was designed to cover up another affair by Donald Trump. And if it were the latter, then this would result in serious campaign finance violations, since this would be an illegal in-kind donation to the Trump 2020 campaign. I think it's very curious that the attorney who helped arrange this hush money payment is Michael Cohen, the president's former lawyer, who never before had served as a lawyer for Elliot Brody. Mr. Brody had never gone to Mr. Cohen seeking his services in the past. And Keith Davidson is the lawyer who arranged as well for this payment, representing the Playboy model. He's the same Keith Davidson who allegedly represented Stormy Daniels in that payment, as well as having been coordinating that with Michael Cohen. So there's a lot of questions that have emerged as a result of this Wall Street Journal article originally and other reports that Mr. Brody made this $1.6 million payment. It's also important to note that the news of Mr. Brody's $1.6 million hush payment, or alleged payment on behalf of himself with respect to this affair, came out 4 days after Michael Cohen's offices and home were raided by the FBI. And we know that the president engaged in phone calls after that raid with Michael Cohen. And then within a matter of days, we see this story surface dealing with this hush money payment. So there are serious questions that need to be investigated. And that's why we filed this complaint before the Federal Election Commission and before the Justice Department.
So John, I want to break it down one by one because this is really important. I want to go over the facts and then we'll get to the questions. So Donald Trump has now already admitted that he did pay the hush money for Stormy Daniels.
Correct, after denying it repeatedly.
So that is for $130,000 for an affair with an adult film actress, $130,000. Michael Cohen is his lawyer. Who's on the other side?
So the other side of the affair with Ms. Daniels, well, right now is Michael Avenatti, but the prior lawyer was Keith Davidson.
Keith Davidson. So Keith Davidson and Michael Cohen make a deal for $130,000 to cover up an affair that Donald Trump had with an adult actress, okay?
Correct.
An adult film actress. So now they make another deal, the same two lawyers, Michael Cohen and Davidson again, and this one's for $1.6 million, and it's also for sleeping with a Playboy model.
Correct.
But they say that it is not for Trump, it is for Brody.
Correct.
Now, did Davidson know or represent Brody before this affair?
No, and in fact, we need to add another fact into this whole question, which is we know in 2009, Mr. Brody pled guilty in New York to having violated laws there for paying off hush money to the girlfriend of a high-ranking state official in the New York State government. And once again, the same pattern is there, where he was trying to essentially curry favor with that high-ranking official by paying off that hush money for an affair that official was having. So he already has been engaged in a prior scheme where he was a third-party payor to someone to hush them from talking about an affair.
And that politician was convicted, right?
Yes.
So now, does Brody, to be fair, does he have a pattern of sleeping with adult film actresses or Playboy models throughout his career and paying them hush money?
No, there's no indication whatsoever. And of course, the 1.6 million figure would be quite curious for somebody who doesn't have that pattern, who has never before engaged in that kind of alleged behavior, and is a pretty unknown character in the country. So why is that level of money? If 130,000 was what was necessary for hush money for Stormy Daniels, why would 1.6 million be necessary for Elliot Brody?
So let's talk. We're going to get to 1.6 million in 1 second, but there's one more thing about the nature of the revelations. So Michael Cohen's office are raided. There's the issue of Stormy Daniels and any other money that might have been paid. And then Brody raises his hand, in essence, saying, oh no, the 1.6 million was for me. It was my affair. And he doesn't deny it. He doesn't strongly deny it. He doesn't do any of the normal right-wing tactics of, no, you'd have to have overwhelming evidence before I admit it. He says, oh yes, it was me who had the affair and I paid the $1.6 million. Is that roughly right?
That is, and then he resigns from the top RNC post he had as deputy finance chair.
So that seems to be a curious thing to do, to jump up and say it was me, it was not anyone else.
It does, and again, this is exactly why we've sought investigation. We don't know all of the facts in this matter, but we know enough facts, sufficient evidence to justify the call for a serious investigation by the Federal Election Commission and by the Justice Department. If it is true that Elliot Brody actually made this $1.6 million hush money payment on behalf of Donald Trump, it would be a serious violation of federal campaign finance law, both for Donald Trump and for Elliot Brody, and it would demonstrate further that this president has no regard for the rule of law.
So if that were the case, that would be a massive violation of the law. Brody, Cohen, Trump would all be in tremendous legal trouble. So
yes.
Okay. Now let's return to the issue of the size of the payment. If an affair gets you $130,000, why does a different affair get you $1.6 million? Well, as was reported in that case, there was, and this was a curious way of reporting it too, a possible abortion. So my understanding was that they said they weren't sure whether she had the abortion before or after the payments, or whether the payment had anything to do with the abortion. Is that their claim?
That is their claim, but certainly the question of whether or not the pregnancy was terminated after the hush money or before is unclear. But I think the point here is that this is, again, a relatively unknown character prior to this news surfacing. And it wasn't just that there was a $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels. There was a $150,000 payment to another Playboy model, Karen McDougal, by American Media Corporation to essentially kill her story before the election. She also allegedly had an affair with Donald Trump, and that hush money of $150,000 was designed to stop her from speaking about this to the press. So
now, let me be clear, the two affairs that did not involve abortion in any way, shape, or form, $130,000 and $150,000. The one where there was an abortion, but we don't know whether it was connected to the payment, that one was $1.6 million. Interesting. Now, the reason that you have investigations is to find out what the reality is. And so we're not concluding anything here. You're not concluding anything by asking those questions. And what we care most about is, was there a violation of the law, campaign finance laws? Because if there was a $1.6 million payment that was not made by Brody, but was made by Brody on behalf of Donald Trump, that would be a violation of campaign finance laws. And if you wanted, and if that's a lot of money, but there are some issues that would be so explosive for a Republican candidate that perhaps it would be worth that money. But we don't know. That's why you go and have these proceedings so you can get the facts, right?
That's right, and I want to emphasize this is not a technical violation. I think sometimes people think, well, failing to disclose a donation is a technical violation, or making any legal in-kind donation is a technical violation. You know, the current limits on how much you can donate directly to a federal candidate are $2,700 per election, per primary, per general. So let's say, for example, that there was a donation of $3,000 to a candidate, $300 more than that limit for a particular election. You might argue, well, that's fairly technical. It's $300 more. It's still a violation. It's still breaking the law. But 1.6 million is not $3,000. 1.6 million is a huge in-kind donation that would be patently illegal. And Mr. Brody would know it as a deputy finance chair of the RNC. Mr. Trump certainly ought to know it as the president of the United States. And Mr. Cohen, as a lawyer, should know it as well. And if in fact this was a scheme to engage in that kind of serious violation of federal campaign finance law that undermines the integrity of our election process, then all of them ought to be held accountable under the law.
And today, CNN reporting that Michael Cohen is thinking about flipping on Donald Trump. Tick, 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 tick. So I believe that it is certainly possible that this case can unwind the presidency. And I think if those facts match up to what it looks like, and that's why you do investigations, that would be significant and massive law breaking. And so Godspeed to you in trying to figure that out and enforcing the government to actually enforce their laws. So freespeechforpeople.org is the organization. John Boniface, obviously their co-founder and president, that joined us. Thank you for joining us and for pursuing what Donald Trump claimed he was in favor of, the rule of law.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.